Hello and welcome to the Metapod Podcast, the Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. It is the celebration. The 2024 Olympics may be over, but the 2024 World Championships are just about to begin. I'm Jake. That's Sean. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm good, Jake. I'm good. We got a late
Do you
night.
like how I tied in the Olympics?
Yeah, that was great. And actually, it makes sense because the Olympics were held in Hawaii this year. Did you know? Was it in Hawaii? The surfing portion of the Olympics. I think we're
Was
in
it?
Maui. I think so.
I don't know, but it's the Paris
I know it's the Paris
2024.
Olympics.
Okay.
Let me look it up. Olympics surfing.
I was like, wow, this transition really went to a space where I didn't realize we were gonna go.
No, yeah, but I was trying to find a tie back. Oh no, they were in Tahiti. Tahiti. That makes sense. It is French Polynesia for Paris.
I was gonna say I don't know what Tahiti means or is.
Tahiti is an island nation, Jake.
Oh, okay.
In the South Pacific. But I was like, I said Hawaii, and then I'm like, that seems wrong. Why wouldn't they pick one of the French islands in the South Pacific? And that does make more sense. It's in French Polynesia. Maybe Hawaii next time though, when it's in LA. But who knows?
Well, now you know, if this is the first time that you've listened to the podcast, that we fact check ourselves from time to time, doing some good stuff. Every now and again, sometimes we have our comment section help us out on that. But anyways, you are here for the news. We got some news in this week, as well as some predictions, some discussions revolving around the Pokemon World Championships happening this weekend in Honolulu, Hawaii. It's going to be an exciting one. I know a lot of people are excited about the new format, right? It's going to be the first event of this new format. Some exciting stuff. The last time we saw this was, I believe, in 2019 when Unified Minds was the new set heading into the World Championships, and ultimately Henry Brand won with Mewtwo and Mew EX. So we'll see if a brand new deck can win its way this time. But for now, Sean, wait a minute. How was your week? We got a tangent.
No, it's fine. No, I have actually something brief to talk about for the week. This last weekend, I played in a local GLC tournament, Jake.
Oh,
we did a locals. We ran it. I think there was 12 players playing GLC. And I went 4-0
with Wailord.
No, with my psychic damage counter spread deck.
Yeah, the psychic damage spread has always been a thing, and it's always been an interesting thing as well. And especially like if you have opponents that don't know like the best way to prevent or play against it, like you just immediately capitalize. It's so crazy.
It's a weird deck because I'm playing Giratina from Lost Thunder. It's absolutely a crazy card. You just bring it out of the when you battle compressor that Giratina turn 1 and then immediately bring it out and ping 2 things, feels so good. The Unbroken Bonds Wheezing is excellent. And then there's just like a lot of other old cards too. Frozen City, if you're looking to play this deck. Dimension Valley, which makes your...
I think like Unified Minds, Blacephalon really good in that deck.
Yes, 12 damage counters. That's one that if people who are newer to Pokemon, like within the last 3 years, they see that card come out when they're at 3 prizes, which I did every single game in the 4 games, by the way. Get it out on 3 prizes. You place 12 damage counters, and just the look in their eyes when they're like, how is this a card? This is so dumb. And I'm like, and then the secret sauce, Jake, is like a combination of those things. Plus, you close it out with Lunala that doubles the number of damage counters on all of your opponent's Pokemon. Either that,
and you board wipe.
Yeah, either that or Devo TM. I came back. I think I took 4 prizes in a turn and a half or whatever. And my personal opinion is that although you'd think that the Dusclops, Dusknoir line would be really good in the format, I personally don't think it's worth the deck space. But maybe I'm wrong.
I don't really think so either. I think just GLC, like your prizes are so essential, right? Especially in a one of type format that like giving your opponent is just like, it's too much.
Yeah.
Right. Even for a spread deck like that, unless you were like using that play to go for game, maybe like, using like that Lunala play. But I think more often than not, it probably doesn't work. But I don't have the appropriate testing because I just play Wailord.
No,
I just play the good old Wailord.
I mean, I was lucky. I didn't have to play any water decks or any grass decks on my way to 4-0. I had 2 fire decks in a row and then a lightning deck, which the lightning deck is scary. I put back in my bench barrier Mew because Electivire? Yeah.
Electivire hits hard. And then Raikou, amazing rare Raikou.
Yep. Yeah. 120 to a bench as well. Yeah, like it can get nasty, especially against a psychic deck where all my mons are pretty low HP. So I did find the Mew early in that game, and my opponent there was no answer. And it's just the whole game. It was just like, I can't even do anything. Like your whole deck, that one card shuts down my whole deck. And I'm like, yeah, because your deck shuts down my deck. So it's one or the other.
It's how it goes sometimes in Pokemon. I haven't played too much Pokemon this past week. My partner moved in finally to Las Vegas, and so just been not really playing cards this week. Just been more getting everything set now that we have a bunch more furniture and things like that in here. But I'm still looking forward to the World Championships and still tuned in to watch because I do have some thoughts about this upcoming World Championships. But before we get into that, we got to talk about the news. We got to talk about some of the cool things coming in terms of products, because there are excellent products coming in for the Pokemon trading card game. The first one, we've talked about these a couple times since like the when new ones release. In a sense, the Pokeball Tins. I'm a big fan of the Pokeball Tins. I don't have many of them, but I like that they exist, and I think they're a really cool, like, little stocking stuffer kind of product, if you will. So, new wave of Pokemon Tins releasing in October for $15. The Moon Ball is going to be featured for the first time in there. If you don't know what these tins are, they're basically like tins that, if you have like little kids or something or whatever, like you can put cards in them. Or little like trinkets, they come with 3 booster packs and 2 sticker sheets. I think in the past they've also come with coins.
Yeah.
In different waves. So you can like put your dice in there and carry it around. You can put your coin, your deck. I don't know if you can put a full sleeve deck in there.
Yeah, I wouldn't put my deck in there only because we've seen that, like, if you sleeve it or whatever, like the size of the tin is just maybe a little too small in certain dimensions. And you don't want to like damage your cards unnecessarily. So that's the one thing I would say is, like, if you got kids and they want to throw cards in there, rock and roll, go for it. But if you're thinking, hey, this is going to be a great new deck box for me, definitely test it out gingerly at first.
It's also one of those really cool products that, like, as a collection, right? They're really cool because there's so many different designs of Pokeballs, and there's so many cool ones like Premier Ball. That's like one of my favorite Pokeballs of all time. Just the simplicity of it. Moon Ball is also really, really cool, especially if you're a big fan of the video games.
Yeah.
So definitely one of those that maybe if you're looking to get ahead on some holiday shopping, or maybe you want to treat yourself with a cool item, the Pokeball Tin is a good one.
The next product, before we get into the meat and potatoes, is
well, maybe we shouldn't call it a product. I don't know if it's technically a product because you can't sell it.
Oh, yes, we're gonna go into the prize packs. Yes, okay, fair. The next thing that's coming is they've announced Prize Pack Series 5, and by announced, your local game stores should probably already be getting them in. I know mine has them in already and will be giving them out this weekend. So
yes, yeah, this weekend.
And the nice thing about these prize packs, Jake, and I think we might have, did we talk about this at some point? I feel like we did, of like, what would you want from the next prize pack series? And I was like, or maybe we talked about it with the trainer's toolkit. But the point is, we are getting stamped A-Spec cards in the new prize pack kits. So
stamped A-Specs in here. I know at least there's Hero's Cape, Awakening Drum in there. I'm trying to quickly look. They're not like fully in alphabetical order, so it's actually like really difficult for me to actually find out which ones they are. But There's a lot of great cards in here. Usually, just as always with these prize packs, they are cards that have been somewhat competitive in some aspect, whether that's in theory crafting, before, or actual play. And they range from several different sets. So you see great cards in there like Professor Sada's Vitality, Cypher Maniacs. Code breaking, which is cool in there, and then EX Pokemon such as Raging Bolt, Roaring Moon, Iron Hands, which is a pretty good one to have in there, and plenty of other great trainers, Sean. But what are some of the great trainers? I think there's two specifically that I want to hit on, some non-ace spec or supporter trainers, specifically items. Oh, Prime Catcher's in here too.
Prime Catcher.
Saw that
Prime
right
Catcher
there.
is in here. Maximum Belt, Hero's Cape. It looks like a lot of the ace specs from the very first set that ace specs reappeared in. So the first set that came out this year are in this version. Outside of that, though, I think the Buddy Poffin is going to be a fan favorite.
That's one of the ones that I was hinting at.
Yeah. Outside of that, I mean, they're continuing to print Arven. Look, I like Arven. I've opened up a number of these packs over the last several months. I have more Arvens than I know what to do with, so please stop. But
well, the thing is, Arven got reprinted like twice, right? In like regular sets.
Yeah, look, Arven's a great card. Bring the price down, all that stuff. But hold on, my cat is being an absolute menace. Like some of these cards, I get why they're printing it, but like, I think the Buddy Poffin's going to do really well. I think that, if you're playing like the Ancient Booster Capsule should be good. Rescue Board will probably be really cool. What's another one that was on your radar?
Earthen Vessel is another card in here. Another really, really good card that we've seen in a ton of different decks. If you didn't catch our decks last week heading into the World Championships, might want to check that out if you're looking to build a deck heading into the opening weekend of Shrouded Fable.
Yeah. So, it's overall, it's going to be really interesting. It's cool. I like that they're printing the ace specs in this one because
I do
too.
Don't
know, the last couple I have felt like there's some good playable cards, but I didn't feel like there was any like big hits that I was looking for. I'm sure that the Radiant, Charizard, and Greninja were always of high interest to people, but the ace specs, I think in particular, are going to be like the big hits in this one.
I think it'll be really cool because I've bought a couple of the ace specs over the last couple weeks, like trying to get into more of like Gardevoir and stuff. And so seeing like Prime Catcher specifically, Prime Catcher, you talk about Unfair Stamp, right? Is Unfair Stamp in here actually? I know that Neo Upper Energy is, but Prime Catcher's in here. So, seeing that card being what was just like a month ago before this release, like a couple of weeks ago before this was announced, at $23, and now even before it's actually released as a play prize pack, sitting down at 19 now, so already dropping a bit, and I assume it's going to drop even more. It's just really nice to see an ace spec like that, like really start to tick it down, especially when Prime Catcher is so good and played in so many decks.
Yeah, and then here's hoping I still have hope that it'll be an ace spec or two in the Trainer's Toolkit. So I think it's less likely now that it's in this in this series.
I'd be all right. I'd be all right if in the Trainer's Toolkit there wasn't, because they're putting them in the prize packs. And if you're wondering actually how you get the prize pack series, if you want to get these cards, if you just go to your local game stores, right, and you play in these local tournaments or you play in cups, challenges, things like that, they usually will give these packs with participation. They give them as prizing as well. It depends on the store based on how they do it, but if you attend your local stores, you will get these prize packs. So very, very nice, very cool, and you get a couple of them. They come a lot with like hollow and non-hollow versions of the cards, and they're all stamped, so pretty nice in my opinion.
And especially the hollow foil patterns on the silver border cards are just gorgeous.
Yes.
They're like really vibrant. So, I don't think there'll be a different hollow foil pattern on the ace specs because it already has a very distinct pattern, but it will have a stamp.
Yeah.
So,
I think it'll stay with the same pattern though.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Last product though, before we get into our world's prediction stuff, is we talked previously about an ultra premium collection that's supposed to be coming out in November. The question that was on our minds was like, okay, will it be themed around Stellar Crown, or will it be themed around the set coming in November? But it looks like now we have the information. The Terrapagos EX Ultra Premium Collection. Bunch of information here, but it feels like that one full art card is getting cut from Stellar Crown, so that will be most likely included in this. So it seems like it will be a Stellar Crown themed set first and foremost.
And
oh yeah,
it looks like there's a lot of great stuff in here, but keep going.
No, yeah, there definitely is. There's a dual deck box. It looks like there's a playmat, which has become pretty standard. There's also a 3-card like Ultra Pro holder with an interesting pattern on the front. And the dice, Jake. Do you want to explain these dice and why they're so cool?
It's really hard for me to see these dice. Are these dice like not a traditional square?
Correct.
Or
these
like
are what
cube?
They're calling cracked ice. Terrestrial. No, these are calling how are they calling them? They just call them 6 damage counter dice, but the dice here are different. They're not your typical square dice. They have like tapered edges on different corners to make it look more like a gem. I assume there will also be just generically shiny and sparkly because, again, Stellar Crown, the theme of the set, but people are pretty hype about this different style of dice.
It's very interesting because, I mean, it looks cool, and I do like the different designs. I'm currently trying to pull up the Play Pokemon Tournament Rules Handbook on their stuff of dice, because I know dice that you use like have to be clear, right? They have to be like when you use them to roll, right?
Yes.
These you can't roll though because they are like dice. 10, 20, 30, 100, stuff like that. But it's really it's interesting that they've gone away from the cubes. I wonder if they'll continue that in the future.
I don't know. I feel like this is like, how some of the ultra premiums in the past have had those like heavy metal dice that they make for the collection?
Yeah, Dark Side Games, one of my local shops here, they sell like a dice kit. I wish I had it on me, but I don't. Sorry, Dark Side, if you're listening. But they're metal dice, and it's like a magnetic case.
Oh, interesting. Well, I know that the previous, like the Zacian and Zamazenta Ultra Premium Collection a couple years ago, and I think the Arceus one too, had like big metal dice in them. So I think this is maybe a special set of dice. I don't think our ETBs are going to look like this usually. So I do think it's going to be unique to this product, is my guess.
It'll be cool in here. We do know that some of the other promo cards that are going to be in here, the Terrapagos EX, which I believe has already been was revealed previously before this, all 3 of these cards. There's also Sylveon EX is going to be in there, and then Cerulege EX, the stellar I don't know what to call them, the terrestrialized Pokemon. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the speculation, is that it'll be the full art of Terrapagos that got cut from the Stellar Crown set, and then these other 2 mainstays. But it's pretty dope. I mean, this Sylveon, we haven't done the set review yet for Stellar Crown. That's coming in the next few weeks, I guess. But the cards look absolutely insane, so I'm excited to review it. I'd be excited to like get my hands on this kit if the set ends up being a banger. So yeah.
Just in case, because I think we talked about this in a previous week, because I think this is an updated news source now, that like with product images and stuff, I think we talked about the potential premium collection like you referenced earlier. So I'll just run through what exactly comes in it in case you do not know. It is releasing on November 1st, 18 booster packs, 3 promo cards, 8 foil cracked ice, Terrestrial Basic Energy, basically like hollow energies in a new pattern. You get a playmat deck box, which is that double deck box that Sean mentioned earlier. Very nice to see that consistently come back in the Pokemon trading card game. One touch protector for the 3 cards, which we've talked about in other products, like the Charizard thing. Like those protectors are kind of cool. 1 metallic coin, 6 damage counter dice that we've already talked about, 2 plastic condition markers, and 1 code card.
Yeah. Just cool stuff all around. Same thing every year. I will say, because this one, unless the Sylveon ends up being some special alternate art that they haven't released in Japan yet, which does happen from time to time now, I will say that I don't think that this kit will be as hype as maybe Mew or Charizard were in the past, which is a good thing, right? Like you'll be able to get your hands on it, but I would just say do not overpay for these. We've seen year over year now that they print enough of these, prices will stabilize. So even if you can't find it on November 1st for whatever reason, they usually been printing these quite a bit, and stores are still left with Charizard ones and Mew ones. So just keep that in mind.
And there's also in here, you can buy them like separately in a sense, like especially on eBay. I think the last time we kind of talked about these premium collections, we talked about like the prices of some of the play mats like on eBay as just play mats and things like that. So if you can't afford this, because it is definitely pricier, but maybe you want a specific thing, don't worry.
Yeah. But Jake, to the meat and potatoes, we have a tier list today of, not every single deck that exists under the sun is going to be on here. Just the ones that when Jake and I were thinking about this, like these seem like the right decks, but this is our world's tier list prediction. I'll also point out that there are going to be variations of decks that may exist. Like, we talk about Dragapult. Well, is it Dragapult with Charizard? Is it Dragapult with whatever? We're just going to focus on Dragapult. We can talk about its options, but we're going to rank it based on what we think the best version of the deck likely is. So we're not going to get into like splitting up the 4 different versions of Dragapult or the 2 different versions of Charizard or whatever. It is too complicated. We ain't got time. Ain't nobody got time for that. So, just to get into it then, the first one I have on the list here, just because it's where it got placed, I have Weirdeer V. Jake, I'm sure listeners who maybe didn't catch the last episode and haven't been keeping up with the online scene are like, what is Weirdeer V? What kind of deck is that? But to remind people, last week we talked about a Weirdeer deck that played alongside the Teal Mask Ogerpon, as well as Blood Moon Ursaluna and Radiant Charizard, to really accelerate a bunch of energy onto the board quickly, move that Weirdeer into the active via a number of different cards, take really big knockouts. So it's a similar glass cannon approach as like maybe a Chenpal deck is. The benefit, though, is that the way that you're getting your energy is also your draw engine. So there's maybe some consistency there, but that's the one that I wanted to, we're starting with that one, and I put Weirdeer because I feel like that's the defining difference of this deck. Jake, I have not played this deck. I know you probably haven't played it, but I want to know, gut feeling, what do you think about this deck? Where do we start?
I think it's probably about C tier. I think cat's out of the bag on this deck. I think it's cool if you're rolling up with it and your opponent has no idea what it's going to do. But because, it's already been talked about, I know like at least Azul has played it extensively on his stream trying to test the deck. I think Andrew Mahone, Tricky Jim also did, trying to see what it was, test it out. Like, it's already in people's mind. The surprise is gone. You know exactly what's coming. People already know, especially at the World Championships level, will know how to play against it, right? Even if they don't test it a ton, right? Being familiar with it and being able to create game plans on the fly probably just it's not the deck for Worlds.
Interesting. So I guess my question there is like I put it in C for now, but even if you know what it's doing, right? Like everybody knows what Chenpal does. Everybody knows what Lugia does. Everybody knows what Maridon does, broadly speaking. But the decks are still good. If you compared this to something like Raging Bolt with Ogerpon or some of those other decks I mentioned, why do you feel like the cat being out of the bag here makes this deck significantly worse?
Because Raging Bolt hits 70 times per energy and is way easier of a beat stick to really be able to knock things out. I think that's like specific. I know I'm specifically saying like comparing it to Raging Bolt, but like Raging Bolt, especially with Professor Sada's Vitality, like gets that extra draw, right? Not only do you get the Ogre Pawn draw, but you get the draw 3 off of Sada. Like it's just really consistent. I do like Raging Bolt heading into this championship. I'm not going to say it. I don't think it's the deck that's going to win, but I think it's just it's much better than Weird Ear in my opinion.
Okay. We can start with Weird Ear at C. I mean, yeah, I'm happy to put it there. It's kind of a fringe deck. It's maybe a deck that surprised people online, but probably not something we're going to see, winning or in the top tables in day 2. Okay, another deck then, Dialga V-Star. Jake, give us a rundown of where you think this deck lives.
I think Dialga V-Star is also in the C tier. I think it just doesn't have enough mustard to really compete in the meta, not really having a consistent one prizer to be able to utilize. I know it has the Zamazenta, right? And Zamazenta is a good Pokemon, a good follow-up Pokemon, right? As a revenge Pokemon hitting 220 without any damage modifiers or anything like that is a good number in a lot of situations. And Star Chronos is an incredible card, but I think compared to a lot of the other decks, this is kind of like the most high roll deck out of the field, because like if you have one Metang that misses, that feels really bad, or one Metang that doesn't hit 2 energies or something, that feels bad. But the second you get the second one that doesn't do it, oh, it's tough out there for you, and you're probably not doing great in there. So I just don't think that Dialga can keep up with the rest of the meta, unfortunately, as much as I like it. And especially if you talk about, some of the other like sniping decks of being able to just whack things left and right. It's I don't know. Dialga had its limelight with Andrew Hedrick and doing exceptionally well, but I think there are some other decks in this format that just got much stronger or are just in such a better position to be able to beat it.
Yeah. I mean, I think the next deck we'll talk about is Regidrago, but like having decks that have access to Dragapult's attack or just Dragapult, placing damage counters, taking out the Metangs. The Metangs are not safe against decks like that. You think 100 HP is good because, yeah, you can dodge a Greninja hit, but it can be really gnarly otherwise. And if you lose your Metangs, your game plan is over. So that
I mean, it's so difficult to get those back.
Speaking of Regidrago, though, Jake, this is, I think, one of the most hyped decks of the set. I am inclined to. I don't think it's an S tier deck. I think it's not. I don't think it's just like, hey, this is the deck to beat. I don't think it's there yet. If it was that, it would have done better earlier. It's not like it got that many new cards from the new set, right? It's not like it got that much better, but it did get some bonuses. I also think there is potentially a Haxorus card that people can consider that it just knocks out your opponent's Pokemon if that Pokemon has any special energy attached to it. So no need, doesn't matter how big it is. So whether or not that gets played, who knows? But my gut would be to put this in the A tier, though. I do think this is going to be one of the decks to plan for, to beat. It's very versatile. Jake, how are you feeling about it?
I'm also going to agree in putting it in A tier. With NAIC, I don't know if NAIC is the best evaluation for the deck, right? Like metas evolve, decks change over time. People need time to figure out these like best or these more perfect decks. There's not really, there's a perfect 60 at one time, but we almost never know what it is. But the best Dragapult deck. And so with the advances that we've had since NAIC, now we have what we would probably consider to be the best Dragapult VMAX deck that we've seen. And it's a tough deck to beat. It's super versatile. It's got the best use of Dragapult out of any deck, in my opinion. Dragapult EX, to allude you a little bit on how I feel about Dragapult EX. And it has plenty of different other options that fit so many different scenarios with Gudra, with Raging Bolt, right? With
Yeah.
Giratina V Star, the rebirth of that card as well. So I just think it's a really, really strong deck. And I think I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it made a ton of noise at Worlds, but I don't think it's the best deck. I don't know.
No, I don't think I don't know if it's the best deck, but I do think we'll probably get vibes if somebody finds a really good list. We're gonna get vibes of Mewtwo and Mew GX again. It may,
Yeah.
because really, people who played back then and remember that deck, there are a lot of similarities to being able to copy the attacks of the Pokemon in your discard. It does that, except it's just Dragon Pokemon. I would say it's a much more limited selection of cards. I don't think it's as versatile as Mewtwo and Mew was, but it definitely has more options than anything else in the format. Like, you have ways to, control your opponent's board with Noivern. You have ways to knock anything out, basically, with Giratina, V-Star's attack. You can knock a lot of things out. And you have ways to spread damage with Dragapult. So, like, you can kind of play it for different circumstances. So,
Yeah, like, I mean, in Charizard matchups, Dragapult's a great attack. In different, more beat stick decks, maybe something like the Gudra is a great attack to be able to prevent damage. Like, it's just so versatile. It's such a cool deck. And when has copying attacks ever been bad?
Yeah. And the fact
Like,
that you're
honestly.
the fact that you're also playing with Teal Mask Ogerpon gives you, I would say, a favorable Charizard matchup, potentially, right? Like, you have a grass type attacker as a backup attacker, can take out a Charizard pretty easily. You have attacks that can take out Pidgeys, and you have easy ways to take out those Rotom Vs or those Luminions with a Dragapult attack. So it just feels like it's got a lot going for it. Next deck on the list, though, another banger. We're talking about Gardevoir EX, the runner-up at NAIC, and a deck that Monkey Dory just absolutely hard carrying, I think, this deck into those top tables. So, Jake, what do you feel about Gardevoir?
I think Gardevoir is the deck to beat at Worlds. I think it is the S tier deck of the format. I think just a lot of, I mean, if you look at a lot of the decks that want to be the top tier, I feel like a lot of them have to ask themselves, how is my Gardevoir matchup? Right. I think that's kind of the question. And so that's why I think Gardevoir is at S tier. And I'm not just saying that because I've been playing Gardevoir. I mean, I have been playing Gardevoir, and that's actually why I think it's S tier, because I think, especially if you know it at its most intricate level, right? You're toward Reckless, things like that. I think you have such a versatile game plan and such so many options of different Pokemon. You have big, huge attackers in the Drifloon, right? With the Drifloon Bravery Charm combo. You have Snipe attacking, which has considerable snipe damage, right? For a lot of these bench sitters that we see in the format with Luminion, with Rotom V, things like that. In the Screaming Tail, right? The Flutter Mane shuts down Lost Box completely. And a lot of other different abilities, especially if you leave them in the active. So it's an incredible deck, in my opinion. I think it has a lot of great options. Also, the 190 attack on Gardevoir is so good to close out games. Just being able to put that energy on to do that final swing. So Gardevoir, in my opinion, is the S tier. I am on the Hyper Aroma train as well. I think
Not
I think
neutralization.
I think Henry Chow kind of said it best, that like at NAIC in his interview, that like, sure, Unfair Stamp is like really good in a lot of situations, but your opponent can like always draw out of it. But Hyper Aroma, if you get 3 Curlias on the board in a game, like turn 2 or whatever it is, like, you're winning the game. Like, you're going to be able to draw so much, and you're going to be able to have so many options available to you. So I mean, like, although at that point, Dragapult Dragapult EX, I keep wanting to say Dragapult VMAX, Dragapult EX in the Regidrago deck wasn't as prevalent. In the meta, I still think Gardevoir is such a good deck, although I think it sometimes has a tough time beating the Regidrago deck. So we'll see exactly. I bet we'll see that matchup on stream more than once.
Yeah, I'll just be watching to see what the A spec is, because I think you're right. I think if any deck is an S tier deck, I know that Lost Box won NAIC, but the introduction of Kyurem I think puts Lost Box down another rung just from where it was. And yeah, I think Gardevoir is the only one that's really proven itself to be a consistent deck. The best players in the world have spent a lot of time piloting this deck over the last year and a half. Yeah, like if anybody's going to take a deck that they know really well and run it well, it's going to be Gardevoir.
I also think Kyurem is slightly overrated.
Sure.
I don't think Kyurem is a bad card by any means, but I don't. It wouldn't surprise me to not see it in some top lists.
I mean, look, it may not be in a ton of lists. I just think that, again, the versatility of 110 to 3 Pokemon on the bench is wild. And like,
it has to be your finishing move, though.
Yeah, I mean,
because the cost is so much. Discarding all your energies in a deck like that, like it has to be your finishing move.
I don't know. It's 3 energy from your Regidrago. It's fine. You put 3 energy back on next turn.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I mean, but you're lost zoning 2 for Giratina's attack. I don't know. I'm like, if you end up knocking out 3 Curlias with that attack and your opponent's got nothing, #, worth it. That is worth it.
I guess, but you better have a good follow-up turn, or else Gardevoir, which is fine with playing behind, will come back.
Well, next deck on the list, Jake, we have, I just put Arceus V-Star because I think that you could build, I think people are playing Armor Rouge with it. There's just a million kinds of boxes you could play with Arceus. I don't actually know what the right version of that box is going to end up looking like. And I also want to point out, is Sharon's Care still in the format, or does that rotate?
I'm pretty sure that's still in the format. Hold on. What regulation are we?
F. So
I was going to say, it's so hard once they went to the letters, because I just thought about sets in their chronological orders. It is an F block card.
So yeah, I'm only pointing this out because Arceus V-Star is 280 HP. That's a big boy. You throw a Hero's Cape on that, then you can Sharon's Carrot, pick all that back up, do it again. It accelerates energy with its own attack. I'm just saying, there's probably something out there that is a little broken with this deck. I don't think it's consistent. I don't think it is S or A tier, but somebody's going to bring some spice. That's all I'm saying.
Arceus is one of those decks. I think of the example when Arceus Gyarados VMAX got second, and everyone was like, what on earth is this deck? That's that's like the prime example right now of Arceus V-Star. Somebody rolls up to the World Championship. It's the perfect secret deck, right? The only thing that you're giving away, like on turn 1, is like your energy type, which could spell out what type you have. But I think there's like a couple different options that you can put with Arceus. I think it can make a more respectable run than something like Weirdeer or Dialga. Like I'm teetering between B and C, to be honest.
I want to throw it in B because I think it's a high potential deck, but I just don't know if anybody's going to bother trying to crack it, right? Like, I think there's something out there. I think you're absolutely right. If you want to run a secret deck at the World Championships, I think Arceus is your best friend. And don't forget, Arceus V-Star did win a World Championship already with Flying Pikachu VMAX. So
yeah, it did, which was another one of those like what the heck kind of decks, I feel like.
Next deck on the list, just being conscious of time, we have Ancient Box. And this is like the single prize version of Roaring Moon in particular. Ancient Box here. You know, Jake, I want your take on this.
I think Ancient Box is an interesting deck. I think it has some pretty okay matchups, especially when you talk about like other single prize potential decks. But I think the entrance of Regidrago in the format can make this really difficult, being able to potentially take out multiple prizes over time in a sense, because I think it is a little difficult for Roaring Moon to knock out a Regidrago in one hit. being on kind of that upper edge of 280. But who knows? I mean, I think that this is another B tier deck. I think if you like this kind of style, it's a good deck for you.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's piloted well. I have friends who play this deck and they play it very well, and it's really strong. I think though that and maybe it has a really good matchup into Gardevoir, to be honest.
It depends, because Gardevoir is a single prize deck in my mind.
It is, if you can take a turn off though with a boss or a prime catcher, bring up that Gardevoir EX, take 2 prizes, do it again, right? Like in theory, you can make it work, but the question then becomes like, does Monkey Dory sneakily get you some extra prizes here and there? But I think it's a very good deck. I don't know if it's the number 1 single prize deck. Well, I have some opinions about what that might look like, but yeah, I'll put it in B for now. Charizard EX, Jake. Charizard EX. It has Duskull. It has Dusknoir. It doesn't really need much more.
I don't think it needs to play Duskull, Dusknoir.
Just
I don't think it does. That line. No, because I think the one prize hurts you more often than not.
Interesting. Okay. Well, so
I don't think the 5 or 13 damage counters is worth like a rare candy or the 5 damage counters, right?
I mean, it's less than the 5 damage counters. It's 5 damage counters plus 30 damage added to your attack. So it's effectively an 80 damage swing.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's worth it in a format like this where like one hit KOing things like Charizard is really easy. Or maybe not really easy, but it's pretty doable for a lot of different decks. And we can talk about some of those other ones here later, but I don't know. Like I've heard a lot of rumblings from several people that I don't know if you need to play the Dusknoir Dusclops. Just play like a more consistent deck to be able to get Charizard and Pidgeot out.
Yeah, fair. And maybe you just play a slower game plan. You do a little bit of damage, and then you save things like Professor Turo maybe for the right moment. So you scoop up a damage. Because if you're playing against a deck that's gonna one shot you every single turn, you're already in a bad way. So, to be frank, but if you're playing against a deck that can't one-shot you, then it's going to take 2 hits, a well-timed Turo, maybe all that you need. So yeah, where would you put it though overall? Is it A tier?
I would definitely put it in A tier. I think it is one of the what I would consider like top 4. I would maybe even consider top 3 saying decks of this format. I think Charizard just really strong as it has been the last while. I think it'll have a stronger showing than it did at the at NAIC, but I mean I think it's still a pretty good deck.
Yeah. Next one on the list is actually somebody left us a comment on our last video. Hasn't heard much about Chenpal in recent weeks, so now we're going to briefly talk about it. Chenpal, I mean, my inkling is actually to put it in A tier. I think it's underplayed as a deck. I don't think that it got any worse, to be honest. Like, I don't think people are playing Devolution TM, which really hurts the deck with Baxcalibur. Yes, some damage spread from Dragapult could be bad, but I don't know, it's 160 HP. If they're doing that with a 2-prizer, you're knocking out 2 prizers, right, against Regidrago. So I think the one card in this set, there might be others, but the one card that sticks out to me in the set that's new that I'm like, I think it makes the deck better is Night Stretcher.
Yes.
Just being able, because that's the one thing that this deck struggles with sometimes, is say you've got one Chenpal prized, or you haven't found your Super Rods, or you have a Super Rod, but you don't have a Nest Ball, whatever, and a Chenpal gets knocked out and you need it back. I think Night Stretcher is really valuable for this deck to just put the Chenpal right back into your hand, put the Radiant Greninja right back into your hand, like whatever the card might be.
And that's not even all of the value that you can get off that card, right? Night Stretcher being able to grab a basic energy, right? Yeah. That could be that one extra energy that you need to be able to knock out a huge Pokemon on the other side of the field. I do know that players like John Eng are playing Chenpal this weekend at the World Championships, or at least he's alluding to playing Chenpal if you're obsessive on Twitter like myself. But I think that Chenpal is in a pretty good spot. I also would put this in the A tier because I've seen top players talking about it. And honestly, like, I mean, Irida is such a good card, a consistency card for this deck. I think just provides so much value.
Yeah. Moving on now to Lost Box, Jake. We've talked about some of the counters to Lost Box, but tell us, like, how are you feeling about Lost Box in this format? Do you think that it's too much concern it's too much concern over nothing?
I think with the introduction of Dragapult, I think maybe puts this into the B tier. I'm not confident at all, actually, on Lost Box. I
Yeah,
think that especially like when we talk about like the presence of Gardevoir, right, with Fluttermane. Although at NAIC we saw Lost Box go insane and take over the sea of Gardevoirs, but I don't think that that is always going to happen. And I think maybe, especially this time around, with two decks that can really do something that heavily damages it, even three with like the little Roaring Moons.
Yeah.
Also playing Fluttermane and being a one prize deck where the one prizer is how much is Roaring Moon? I mean, it could have the
140 plus maybe
the
60.
ancient,
So almost two. It
yeah,
could be
with that,
200. Yeah.
which can be very difficult. So I think that there's a lot of things in the way of Lost Box, and I don't know if I'd be confident in this event. So I'd put it at B tier. But Lost Box is one of those things where I just could be completely wrong.
Yeah. Next one here, I wanted to put it on the list because I think it's a cool deck, but Ancient Roaring Moon EX. So the Roaring Moon that auto knocks out things. I'm not gonna lie, I just want to put this in D tier at this point. I think it's a cool deck. I think it's a fun deck, but I think too many decks right now have the potential to place damage counters, like little damage counters here and there. People are playing Lost Vacuum, so even your like ancient booster capsules are not safe. And if you're trying to take out a Charizard and they are playing the Duskull line, shoot, they could just use their Duskull, finish that little Roaring Moon off, and then boss up another thing for 4 prizes in one turn. And that feels horrible if you are the Roaring Moon player. You cannot abide that.
I do think that the little baby Roaring Moon is the way to play Roaring Moon. Is it D tier? I'm not sure.
This is
I
not
think
to say
there
it's
are
a
other
bad
decks
deck,
in here.
but
I think there are other decks in here that are D tier worthy, but it's not good.
Yeah, look, I think it's a great card. I think it's a very fun deck, but I do think that it needs way too much, and it needs your opponent to not have a lot, and that's not the case. But speaking of a card and a deck that has a lot, Lugia V-Star. I think that one thing that I want to point out with this one is this deck had a lot of hype, especially in the day 2 selection of the online tournament that we reviewed. That's the Tournament of Doom. Jake, what are your feelings on Lugia V-Star right now?
I think Lugia V-Star is strong. I think Lugia V-Star no, it's not at what it was, I don't think, but way back when it was pretty much the BDIF of the format of Silver Tempest format, I think it was. But I do think its combination of cards that it has are really strong, and there's different ways to play it, right? We see so many players either play the Minccino line or not play the Minccino line. The Minccino line is great because you have different one prizers, and especially if it's not like a spread deck of any kind, you're not really worried about those little babies getting knocked out alongside your big Lugias or even different attackers that you can have, like the Ogre Pawn, right? Well, I think it's Well Mask Ogre Pawn, the water one. I mean, a lot of different options for you in this.
Yeah, no, I really like it. I want to put it in A tier because I do think it is one of those top tier decks. I think that the Lugia deck is very meta dependent. And actually, I want to say that and then immediately jump over to Snorlax Stall, Blocklax. And the reason I think it's very meta dependent, I think these two decks, Lugia and Snorlax, I think will have a big impact on how the entire tournament gets defined. Because if there's a lot of Snorlax and not a lot of Lugia, I think that Stall is a hugely powerful deck right now. Like, I think that, I know that we have some people talking about Duskull and Dusclops, but ultimately there's not a lot of switching cards out there. Decks like that are happy to give up prizes throughout, the game, and then just get you to a point where you run out of resources. And so I think this deck is really powerful, but the more Lugia is in the field, the worse Snorlax does, in my opinion, just because of all the jet energy. So I think I put Lugia in A tier, and I want to know, Jake, though, like, do you think this is a chance? Is 2024 Worlds the opportunity for Stall to get a dub?
I think Stall is a good deck going in here, but I think there may be some matchups that it can struggle against. Lugia, like you were saying, is what I would consider to be the most obvious one there is, but even then, like, especially when people know your strategy and know what you're going to do, like, especially some of these more flexible decks like Gardevoir can kind of just play around it, right, with different options that they may have. Regidrago, even if they get their energies. And so your game plan almost feels like it revolves around hitting heads on crushing hammers, which not great. I know there's way more depth in Snorlax Stall, and I'm kind of downplaying it a little bit, but I do think it's a pretty strong choice. I think this is the best Control has really looked like in a while, and so I think we'll continue to see that.
I put it in A tier because I really do think a very good pilot can do a lot. But to your point, it's going to depend on what other people bring. And I think that's like always, that's what makes Stall kind of an awkward decision at a big tournament, because it's very meta dependent. But the next one here, Jake, is I threw this in. I don't think anybody's really playing this deck, but I do think that if somebody wanted to make a different form of Control, the opportunity is there with Arbok EX.
Jake, D tier.
You think it's D tier? Okay, I'll throw it in D tier because I don't necessarily disagree. It hasn't proven itself. But can I just point out, though, if somebody can make 0-6 Machinations and or an Unfair Stamp turn, plus discarding 2 cards from your hand, the one thing I will say is people are not playing Bibarel nearly as much as they were before, instead opting for Pheasantipity, right? Pheasantipity only procs if something is knocked out. That Arbok EX attack doesn't do a ton of damage, so it's unlikely to knock something out immediately. So if you can bring that Pheasantipity into the active, hit it, and say, you go down to 1 card in hand, and they can't draw out of it because they maybe don't play Bibarel. They're not playing Mew EX right now. I think a lot of decks are in that position where I genuinely think that, like, once you knock that Pheasantipity out and they go down to 0 cards in hand, potentially, it could be bad news. Let's just say that's all I'm going to say.
That could be interesting to see, and see like a cool run, or maybe the deck in the first couple rounds of the World Championships. I don't know. I'm not a believer. Like, if you want to play something like Control-y and stuff, just play Snorlax.
No, that's fair. I think that's the logical. That's definitely the logical way to think about it. But I just wanted to put it on here because I don't know. I want somebody to bring it. I want to manifest it. How about that? But Jake, speaking of another archetype that people don't like, Mill, how does Great Tusk look for you in this format?
Also D tier. I just wouldn't do it. I mean, just play Ancient Box and have like a 1 Great Tusk in your deck in case you need it for any certain situation. But I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I just think people at this level are going to know how to play against it. If you made it to Worlds, you're a really good player. You've practiced a lot. I don't think anybody's going to be caught off guard by Mill, because you don't mill enough actively. So, all right. Well, this is one that I've seen a little bit of hype for in the last few days. Is Maridon EX? Does it have the potential to make a comeback, Jake?
I think Maridon EX is probably sitting on a C tier. I think if we were to rank the C tier, I think this could be the upper echelon of the C tier, in my opinion, because it's a deck that, especially when it pops off, it absolutely pops off. But I think you're way too dependent on Electric Generator in my opinion, to be able to fully utilize this deck at a super high competitive level consistently. And so I think that there's just too many things as well that are hitting just too good of numbers on you. You have too many 2-prize Pokemon in there. You don't really have any great 1-prize options. I think you're going to lose the trade. But we've seen in the past, if Lugia does really well, so does Maridon, right? So who knows? Maybe we could see a Maridon have a deep run if they hit enough Lugias.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It depends on, are you hitting Lugias? Depends on if you're, if you're hitting Gardevoirs and you're able to get those prime catcher turns with Iron Hands, right? Like you can really take some big knockouts there for those extra prizes, and especially early game when Gardevoir does nothing. Gardevoir does absolutely nothing in the early game. They need 2 turns minimum to start doing anything. That's probably all that Iron Hands and Maridon need to take over those games. So yeah, it does feel like as a 2-prize deck, it feels more like less stable than say a Raging Bolt or even a Chenpal. So, but it'll be interesting. I know there's a lot of people who love Maridon decks. So, but the next one is another electric deck, Jake. Iron Thorns EX, the one that shuts down abilities.
This is another C tier, but it has an asterisk because it's not on the same C tier level as Maridon. Like, I've been watching some results and people posting like their tournament results from online tournaments, and I have yet to see like an Iron Thorns beat Lugia like consistently in these tournaments. So if a Lugia can make deep runs at these, I can't remember who it was on Twitter, so I'm so sorry if you listen to this podcast, but I saw you tweet that Lugia beats Iron Thorns and you beat multiple Iron Thorns in your like 9-round tournament or whatever it is. I just can't believe that this is a deck. Like, I mean, it's just, I can't, because like, I have even beaten this deck. I think I even posted it in our Metapod official Metapod Discord server. If you want to join, link in the description below or in the show notes. For those of you listening audio only, I beat an Iron Thorns by just putting my Mimikyu in the active, attaching 2 energies on it, and whacking it for 70 every turn.
Yeah,
because they can't do anything to Mimikyu unless they have Canceling Cologne, sure. But if I suspect that they have Canceling Cologne, I just feed them a couple 1-prizers, but I just get Mimikyu back, because the third time that I have Mimikyu back, you're losing the game.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think that it definitely has the potential to shut down certain decks, but I think it's very linear strategy. Hard loses to other decks. So it's kind of like the Iron Thorns that makes a deep run is the Iron Thorns that gets paired up correctly throughout the tournament. But ultimately, I just think too many decks have answers for it. So
yeah.
This is one of your favorite decks, though, Jake. The the Okie Dokie, what do you call it? Legendary Trio?
Loyal Trio.
Loyal Trio. Yes. I have no idea how this deck really works, but please enlighten me.
This is such a cool deck. I love this deck. Unfortunately, it is C tier. It has the opportunity to pop off in so many different situations, right? You have so many different options with the Okie Dokie EX hitting huge damage if you're able to get it poisoned, which there are a lot of different opportunities to get it poisoned with Janine something or other, Janine Secret Technique, I think it's called. The Petun EX, right? Also poisoning your Pokemon, bringing it to the active is a really good combination with something like Tatsugiri. Tatsugiri being able, you switch your Okie Dokie into the Tatsugiri, or you bring up the Tatsugiri. Let me restart.
Yep.
Into the active right after your Pokemon's been knocked out. You go get a supporter, and then you can use Petun to basically make the Tatsugiri a free retreater. It's such a cool deck, and having like Monkey Dory as well as a single prize option, right? A 2-prizer hitting for 190 as a single prize option, 230 actually with the Binding Mochi, I think it's called. It's the tool card that adds more energy or adds more power if your Pokemon's poisoned. This is the sickest deck. I love this deck. It's such a cool new deck, but unfortunately, I don't think we'll see really much of it at Worlds. We'll see it like round 1 or round 2, and that's it.
Yeah. It's a great deck to bring to your locals. I think it's a great deck to even bring to like challenges and cups when it becomes legal. But yeah, I think you're right. I also think that people going to Worlds, like they're going to be looking for the secret sauce, but this is too new, right? Like if
Yeah.
there's a secret sauce to be had here, it's too unexplored.
I also don't think that you beat Gardevoir because
No?
Gardevoir just out one prizes you. And if
I
you
suppose.
have and like the Mimikyu provides a lot of problems. Mimikyu
Yeah.
and Fluttermane.
Yeah, that's fair. Just 3 decks left. Next one here, I'm just putting in Turbo Hands. Some form of Turbo Hands. Maybe it's a Future
So
Box.
like Future Box?
Could be Future Box. Could just be like, yeah, maybe you play a one of Maridon, but like really it's all about Turbo Hands. It's all about double turbos and electric generators. You play like 18 energy. I don't know what it is, but I wanted to throw this up there. I do think that I don't know if Turbo Box necessarily. No, I don't know if Future Box is the way to build it per se, but I think that Iron Hands itself is just a crazy strong card. Do you think we see any Turbo Hands build that's that linear?
I don't think we see any Turbo Hands build, so I'm ready to put it in C or D. But I do think that Iron Hands, a great card that you'll see in Lugia, is a card that you'll see in Lost Box decks, right?
Yep,
Turbo Lost Box decks, Maridon, another good one. And Sean, I credit Bob McDougall on Twitter. I saw them. They do some local judging at their events, and they saw somebody win the local challenge that they had with Iron Hands Thornton in their Gardevoir deck.
Oh, interesting. So you're playing Gardevoir, you have your Drifloon or whatever out, and you Thornton the Iron Hands out, and then throw maybe your one electric energy in the deck, or maybe you're playing a legacy energy or a luminous, but probably a basic because you have Earth and Vessels in the deck.
Yes,
that's interesting.
So I know it's a really cool idea. Do I think it's the best idea?
No.
Do I think it's probably going to win Worlds? Probably not. But I do like that this deck kind of has that flexibility that I think can actually fit. I just think that there's maybe some sacrifices that you'd have to make that I'm not really willing to make. But shout out to that person, whoever did that, because you're so cool in my opinion.
All right, wrapping it up with 2 more dragon type decks. We have Dragapult EX on its own, not part of Regidrago, just a Dragapult deck with all the fixins.
I think Dragapult probably B tier. I think Michael Pramwant said it best at NAIC after his round in his interview when they asked, how did you decide Dragapult? And he said, well, I just put 3 really great cards together, Dragapult EX, Charizard EX, and Pidgeot EX. And he's like, I made a deck out of it. And so I think that's like not a bad strategy to have a deck that is flexible like that. I just unfortunately think Dragapult is best as a like tech option in decks like Regidrago, which I don't even think you could consider it as a tech thing because it's one of the only.
It's one of the main.
I think
attackers.
the only. Yeah, it's like the main attacking option for Regidrago. I think it's the only one that you play it 2 of.
But it's interesting, like Regidrago is a better Dragapult deck in many instances, right? Like
yes, yeah.
And I would agree that like Dragapult EX does suffer from this problem of it's a good card on its own. It just is. But in the format, for whatever reason, it's just like it doesn't perform as well as you'd want. And the way that you make the deck better is to make the deck less consistent, right? To throw in a Charizard line, to throw in a Pidgeot line, and all of a sudden you're juggling 3 different lines of Pokemon that you need to find the right cards for that have different numbers in your deck. And, it's just, in my mind, it's just one of those decks that also is, while you're trying to make it more versatile, you're making it less consistent. And that, to me, like, negates the benefit a bit.
And that's something that we've seen a ton in different these copy decks over the years, right? Reshiram and Charizard GX, prime example in that 2019 Mewtwo and Mew GX deck, having great attacks and was a good deck. Green's Reshiram Charizard, you might remember, a pretty cool deck. Yeah, Kiawe in format was also really cool with that in the early days when Burning Shadows was still around. But I think, again, it's got that similar effect, like you said, of just like, it's just better in these like copy style decks as an attacking option.
Last deck of the day, Raging Bolt, probably with Teal Mask Ogerpon. That's the way we're going to be building
it. Definitely with Teal Mask Ogerpon. If you're not doing it, you're playing it wrong.
I think this is just an A tier deck. I think, if Chenpal is in the A tier, this deck is in the A tier. It's trying to do the same thing Chenpal does, but it has a more consistent draw engine and beefier HP that is harder to knock out. In some ways, it may be a better Chenpal, but Chenpal is kind of its own beast, right? Like, if you high roll in, Chenpal is a better deck, I think. But averaging everything out, I think that Raging Bolt is a better deck on average.
And I think Raging Bolt has a lot of things going for it, right? For 3 energy, you can hit 210, which is a pretty good number, I feel like, especially for the early game. Whereas with Chenpal, 3 energies discarded, you're doing 180, right? So bigger numbers with the Raging Bolt, especially when you can usually accelerate about the same amount of energies with the combination of Ogerpon and Professor Sada's Vitality in the Raging Bolt. So like you said, Raging Bolt just kind of has better draw, whereas the Chenpal has to get these certain items, right? Whether that's Arven or Irida or something of the sort, has to be able to get those, or even Cypher Maniac's code breaking. Maybe if they play the Bibarel or Pokestop, right, in combination with that. We've seen that in the past in these Chenpal lists. So, but I do agree that Raging Bolt's probably A tier, which makes me realize visually looking at this that we have a lot in A tier, but I think this is a really cool format.
Yeah, I think it's a varied format. I think a lot of it's gonna depend on what people end up bringing and playing at the tournament, who gets matched up with who. I think weirdly, like, we got to assume that most of the players in the tournament are very good players. You made a Worlds invite in the structure. It's going to be even crazier next year. But all these players I have to consider very skilled. So I think matchup is going to be more of a dependency in this tournament than it is in even a normal large-scale tournament. So any one of these decks I think could win. But Jake, right as we're signing off, want your prediction. What do you think takes home the World Championship this year?
Gardevoir. I'm just so high. I'm so high on Gardevoir right now, and especially, and this has no influence on the NAIC stuff that we did. Like, I'm looking at this, like, in the games that I've played and watching other people play it, seeing it run. I don't know, man. I just think Gardevoir and Hyper Aroma is so good.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely fair. I actually want to go out on a limb here, and I think that it's time for Charizard to reign supreme on the world stage.
All right.
I'm just going to go out there. I think, the energy acceleration of 3 fire, we might see some gouging fire or some other shenanigans that people play that people aren't expecting. When you can accelerate 3 energy out of nowhere, you could even, this is going to be crazy, Jake, throw in an Iron Hands. Put 3 energy onto an Iron Hands, attach an electric. I'm not saying anybody's going to do it.
You could. I don't know how good that is, but you could. I don't know if
it's good. It may not be good. I'm just saying there's a lot of versatility. I think if you were, like, really cooking something up, something new, I think that offers some interesting angles. But that's where I'll leave it.
And we'll cover all of those wacky decks nonetheless next week on the Metapod podcast, Pokemon podcast that revolves around the evolving meta. Thanks for listening again. Official Discord is in the notes below if you want to talk about the World Championships, the decks that are in there, different ideas. I know usually our deck building advice forum in there is usually popping with different conversations and different decks. There's some really cool ones like Palafin I saw in there. We see Mawile, Trap, and also Gouging Fire, Dusclops, just to name a few. But thanks for listening. I'm Jake. Oh, sorry.
One other thing. I'm gonna be doing a Metapod stream on Saturday. I know it's Worlds, but Worlds is on Hawaii time. So if you want to catch a stream, maybe see, it's going to be in the same format, maybe see what people are playing, before catching some World stream. Just keep an eye out.
Ooh, I'm going to be at the advantage on the West Coast for Hawaii time. It's only like 3 hours ahead of me, or behind me.
Yeah, it's true.
Nice. All right, cool. But anyways, thanks again for listening. Hope to see you in the next one. See you later.